For my 31st birthday, my friends got me a heritage DNA test. One of those where you send a sample and get an approximate percentage of what makes up your background. I don't think there was anything in particular that made them gift it to me, though. I think they ordered one for themselves and got a 2-for-1 kind of deal. Still, I figured it'd be fun to check it out. My biological grandpa died when my dad was very young, and my grandmother remarried long before I was born, so I was never told a lot about that side of the family. I'd always been a bit of a sickly child, so I've been a bit wary about looking too closely at my family and health history, but I figured this couldn't hurt. So I filled out the form, provided the sample, and sent it on its way. Then I just sort of forgot about it. When I finally got the results, it came with a few surprising revelations. While the majority of my heritage was entirely predictable, there was an 11% splash of something called the Northern Scandinavian Blue Hill Tribe. I asked my parents about it. While my mother had no idea what the Blue Hill Tribe was, she was pretty sure it wasn't from her side of the family. My dad was equally confused. Sure, he didn't know much about his biological father, but he knew for a fact that the man was from Oklahoma. His mom, on the other hand, was Minnesotan. Dad got curious and ordered his own test within the hour. As I ended the call and boxed the packaging up, something fell out. A sturdy envelope made of thin navy blue cardboard and sealed with a sunflower emblem. It had a mild chemical smell to it, like a sweet ammonia. At first I thought it was going to be some kind of special offer, much like what got me that test in the first place. But after turning it over, I could see it was addressed directly to me in handwritten cursive. It read, "Congratulations on your recent result. As part of our further effort to explore the diverse world of unified heritage, and in cooperation with our various multinational partners, we would like to extend an invitation to descendants of the Northern Scandinavian Blue Hill Tribe for an eventful day of education, connectivity, and celebration. Please consider this invitation and review the enclosed details using your login credentials. We hope to see you there." I didn't know exactly what to make of it, but I decided to check it out. And holy hell, it reeked of scam. Here's what it offered. A fully paid 3-day stay at a hotel in Manchester, New Hampshire. Free entry to the company-sponsored Heritage Celebration event, alongside other members of both the Blue Hill Tribe, but also other unique and diverse backgrounds. There were several groups listed, mostly hailing from the Scandies, the Carpathians, and the Ural Mountains. I would have to pay for the trip to get there, though, and they were clear about food, drink, and room service not being included. But all in all, it sounded too good to be true. After several hours of trying to find my way through customer service websites, I finally got a hold of an actual service rep over the phone. At first, they seemed to have no idea what I was talking about, but when I referenced a personal case number at the bottom of the envelope, they referred me to a special events manager. This manager, in turn, confirmed everything. I know, they laughed. I know how it sounds, but this is actually sort of a golden ticket thing. It's a biennial event and part of our charity effort, so there's a tax incentive for us as well. If you can make it, I'd recommend checking it out. We got some event photos on our website for reference. I did as she suggested, and I gotta say, I was convinced. I accepted. My flight arrived on the morning of the first event day, about 3 hours ahead of opening. I had an uneventful early check-in, spotting the locked doors through the lobby. There were a few posters marking the Heritage Celebration event, and there were already a couple of people roaming the halls outside, but I decided to catch my breath a bit before the doors opened. I got to my room and clocked out for a couple of hours. I double-checked the event schedule on my phone, making mental notes of the various talks, guided tours, luncheons, dinners, and get-togethers. It was a full 2-day event. I was surprised at just how much there was to do, considering the event was intended for no more than a couple hundred people at most. Still, I couldn't complain. But just as I drifted off for a nap, I got a notification on my phone. A text from my dad. Apparently, he'd recently gotten his results back. Strangely enough, he didn't have any percentage of the Northern Scandinavian Blue Hill Tribe in his genetic makeup. Maybe my mom wasn't as southern as she thought. Once the doors opened, there were about 100 people walking about. Some looked like average Joe Nobodies. Others were clearly some kind of corporate representatives. I could tell at least 6 different accents just by walking around, and a couple of foreign languages. There were a few booths to check out, mostly advertising various new services and products by the company behind the DNA test, but also one that was just information about various forgotten or unusual tribes. Going through the pamphlets, I couldn't find one about the Blue Hill tribe, so I decided to ask the service rep behind the counter. "Blue Hill?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "I'm not sure Another rep whispered something in his ear, and he nodded. "Oh, right," he corrected. "We don't have any reading material on that subject, but I think there is an info session. Should be part of the Tribes of the North meetup." I double-checked the schedule again and made my way to a couple of events. The Tribes of the North meetup was an after-dinner event, part of the late-night, off-hours socializing thing they tried to get going. I spent the afternoon listening in on various other topics, trying to pass the time. There was a speaker on the topic of nomadic North American tribes, as well as a workshop about forgotten languages. It was all interesting in its own way, but I found myself drifting away just after lunchtime. I had to take a rest around 3 p.m. because of an upset stomach, a relic of my sickly past. Later, I took a walk around town and had a decent meal at a local restaurant before I headed back to the hotel. I was a few minutes late to the meetup. There were about 24 people there in total. We didn't really have any common features. We had different skin, hair, eyes, and we were all from different parts of the U.S. A couple of them were Canadian, and there was this one guy from the Philippines. It was pretty clear who the event organizer was, though. A chipper young woman in a black pantsuit with a company logo pin and a digital clipboard. She went around the room confirming that everyone was a member of the Blue Hill. I overheard an older woman mentioning she was categorized as over 30%, while a young man mentioned he had only 5. The young woman cleared her throat and excused herself, calmly demanding the attention of the room. "Thank you all so much for coming," she smiled. "I'm sure you all have 100 questions, and we thought this might be a good time to get to know one another a little better. Please follow me." We were led through a corridor to a smaller open room, a sort of meeting space in the back. She turned down the lights a little bit and set out a couple of platters of cheeses, crackers, and some alcohol-free sparkling wine. There were a couple of people there already. I was about to spark up a conversation with a 50-year-old man who looked as confused as me when the chipper young woman took hold of the room again. She directed our attention to a man that I can't for the life of me remember the name of. Weston or Wesley, I think. He, in turn, welcomed us and encouraged us to indulge in the various snacks scattered throughout the room. Then he introduced us to the topic of the evening, the Blue Hill tribe. "If there's one thing I'm certain of," he started, "it is that every single person in this room has had a serious medical condition at some point in their life. Something unusual. Does anyone mind sharing an example?" I didn't speak up about the severe ulcers I had as a kid and the partial transplant I had to get, but there were others who openly shared various issues. Heart valve problems, cornea transplants, nerve damage. Everyone seemed to have something. The man just nodded as if expecting this. "This is sadly a common attribute of people with lineage dating back to the Blue Hill tribes. So let's take a closer look at the history and customs of these unique people. And while we do, please feel to mark yourself in the attendance sheet." He continued to speak of a group of people native to the northern Scandinavian mountain ranges. There were dates, locations, an approximate number of tribal members, and a few other sparse details. I marked the form while I waited, realizing pretty early on that what he was saying was suspiciously generic. He spoke of leather and bone craftsmanship, and a belief in mountain spirits, but there were no details, no references, no pictures, drawings, or artifacts. I noticed a lot of people around the room paying close attention, and not really thinking too much about what they were filling out on the attendance sheet, but I took a closer look. Our names were already on the sheet, so we were only supposed to make a check mark. However, there were also percentages printed on the side, corresponding to the percentage of heritage we had in common with this tribe. I recognized my 11% and the 30% of the old woman. There was also a series of other numbers that I didn't immediately recognize. When I thought no one was looking, I snapped a picture of it, just in case. After a 15-minute lecture on the history of the Blue Hill tribe, I came to the realization that I hadn't actually learned anything. The locations and dates were so generic that there was no way to fact-check it, and there were no details as to the various customs and crafts. Looking around the room, I noticed the chipper young woman was off in the corner, whispering to someone on her Bluetooth earpiece, her eyes scanning the crowd with a serious demeanor. There was a man in a suit by the doorway taking pictures with his phone, and a hotel functionary offering refreshments being turned away. This was clearly a private matter, and of great interest to the company for some reason. I snapped to attention as the room applauded. The lecture came to an end, and we were given some time to mingle, but not without another reminder to make a mark on the attendance sheet. I chatted a bit with a few people, but it all felt a bit forced. Just a few words here and there. I got the impression that none of us had very much in common. No one seemed to have any idea where that part of their heritage actually came from. There was this one guy who had studied his genealogy extensively, who insisted that it was strictly impossible for him to be even partly Scandinavian. "I've mapped out every family member for 6 generations, he scoffed. "There's no way." As more and more people filtered out into the night, I decided to lag a bit to see what was being said behind closed doors. I wasn't sneaking around on all fours like a spy, just lingering a little too long on the other side of a bathroom door, or stopping to conveniently check my email near a hushed discussion. I picked up a few bits and pieces. Discussions about our percentages, for example. There was also talk about a second event the following night, and how it wasn't officially on the schedule. They referred to it as a sort of closing ceremony. There was also a short talk about inviting a few of us to a private meeting. I heard 2 people squabbling a bit about the details, but I didn't catch much of it. I clearly heard a sentence, though, as they finished. "Just get the ripe ones," none of them snarled. "None of that 3% shit." I didn't like that. Not one bit. Returning to my room, I decided to pack up my things. I had a bad feeling about whatever they were up to, and I couldn't help but to imagine that they had something planned. Maybe it was a scam after all, or something worse. Either way, I wasn't eager to find out. I couldn't find a reasonably priced flight back home until early morning. It was almost 12 hours away, but I figured I could pull an all-nighter and get out as soon as the sun rose. I could wait a few hours at the airport if need be. With my bags packed and ready, I settled in for a long night. It was somewhere around 2 a.m. when I found myself staring at late-night TV and scrolling on my phone. As a salesman prattled in the background, a stray thought hit me. I decided to take another look at the attendance sheet photo. There was a set of numbers by each person that didn't make immediate sense to me. I brought out a pen and paper and started breaking them down. First in sets of 2, then individually. Then sets of 3. Trying to find some pattern or idea. It took me a little longer than I care to admit to recognize something. The last 4 numbers correlated to one pattern. Floor and room number. That left 4 other numbers, which, when broken down into pairs of 2, correlated to a month and a day. The date itself didn't make much sense, though. For me, it was a few days after I'd sent in my first sample. Then it hit me. It was probably the day they received the sample. Taking a closer look at the percentages, I could see that everyone with 9% heritage or lower were situated on lower floors, while those with 10% and higher all seemed to have the higher. Maybe there was a sort of unspoken threshold happening at 10% and up. Could that be what they referred to when they said to get the ripe ones? As I scrolled through the various images from previously hosted charity events, I got a notification. My phone warned me that my camera app had unexpectedly closed. Strange, seeing as how it wasn't open to begin with. A bad feeling settled in my stomach. I was on the hotel Wi-Fi. Could they be monitoring our activities? I considered the option that I was just being tired and paranoid. That might very well be the case. But on the other hand, I'd heard what I'd heard. It was stressing me out, further upsetting my already sensitive stomach. I could feel a tinge of pain and decided to get some ice. Might sound like a stupid home remedy thing, but sucking on an ice cube has always helped to calm me down. I went down the corridor, got myself some ice and a bucket, and returned to my room. As I was about to round the corner, I recognized a familiar sound. My hotel room door being closed and locked from the outside. Peeking around the corner, I noticed 2 people dressed in black disappearing down the hall, mumbling quietly to one another. Returning to my room, I couldn't help but second-guess myself. Had the bathroom door always been open? Was the same channel on the TV playing? Had someone moved my bags? It was hard to tell. That's how I spent the night, wondering. My heart sometimes skipped a beat as I thought I noticed something new, but ultimately I couldn't find anything immediately threatening. I pulled out my phone battery just in case and kept it in my other pocket. No one would be tracking me anytime soon. I messed up my bed to make it look like I had slept in it, even though I spent most of my time in the bathroom, ready to lock the door and call the police. I nodded off a few times, but eventually the sun broke the horizon, a few rays of sunshine slipping in through the frosted bathroom window. I got my bags and left. One nervous elevator ride later, I slapped down the hotel key on the reception desk and headed for the exit without elaborating. I accidentally made eye contact with a hotel security guard by the exit, who gave me a curious side-eye. "Sir?" he asked. I stopped briefly and excused myself. He held up a hand. "Sir, may I speak to you?" he repeated. "I have an appointment," I smiled. "Sorry." "It won't take long," he smiled. "Right this way." Looking at the silver-colored revolving door that could get me out of there, I considered my options. I could make a break for it, or I could just see what this was about. I decided to just talk to the man, banking hard on it not being anything serious. In hindsight, I should have gone for the goddamn door. I was taken to a small room right next to the reception. There, he asked to see my phone. I showed him, although the battery was still out. "My supervisor had a couple questions," he said. "She's just outside. Won't be a minute." "I'm sorry, but I've got a..." He pocketed my phone, smiled, and stepped out of the room. But it wasn't an ordinary service personnel kind of smile. It was almost apologetic, like he knew he'd landed me in some kind of trouble. And through the door came the chipper young woman from the previous night. She wasn't as chipper this time. She didn't sit down, instead opting to stand on the opposite side of the room with her arms crossed. For a solid minute, she just stood there, considering what to say. Finally, she let out a sigh and took a step forward. I felt like a scorned schoolboy being dragged to the principal's office. "Are you leaving early?" she asked. "I'd be ashamed to miss the get-together tonight." "I'm thankful to have been a part of all this," I said. "But I really gotta get going." "Oh?" She feigned surprise. "Family emergency?" "That's private," I said. I could still hear hotel personnel outside and figured she didn't want to make a scene. I leaned back in my chair, confident and quiet. She didn't take that too well. "I think it'd be best if you stayed a little longer," she continued. "I don't think I will. I don't think there's much to debate." "I'm sorry, but you have no..." She slammed her fist on the table and stared me down, unblinking and furious. There was a slight tremble in her movement. There was no way those outside didn't hear us, and yet no one moved a muscle. Perhaps she was in more control than I'd anticipated. "I think you're gonna stick around for a while," she snarled. "Or we're gonna have a problem. You wanna have a problem with me?" "No," I said, shaking my head. I don't." "Then you're gonna shut the fuck up and play along." I was dumbstruck. There was no ambiguity here. She was outright threatening me. I could barely understand why. Maybe she'd seen something on my phone while I was connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, or maybe they'd noticed me spying. Perhaps they saw me pondering the attendance sheet, I don't know. Either way, they weren't taking any chances. I didn't see that hotel security guard again. Instead, they put me in a room with a very quiet man in a suit. He didn't answer my questions, and he wasn't much for small talk. All he did was stand outside the room, checking in on me as soon as I made a noise. I spent all day in that room. The small, 10 by 14 feet room with little more than a couch, a coffee table, and the most generic-looking hotel painting I'd ever seen. Still, as calming as that room was, I was freaking the fuck out. There was nothing for me to do at that point. No harebrained schemes that could make me magically pass through a wall. I was stuck there. And I sure as hell wouldn't fight this guy. It didn't take a detective to spot that he was armed. The stress made my stomach act up. I was allowed to use the bathroom, but they kept the stall door open, and then it was straight back to the room. I tried frantically to come up with some kind of plan, or figure out some sort of specific turn of the corridor where he wouldn't have a clear shot, but it was useless. There were long, wide-open spaces and no harsh corners. But that was my mindset, I was still under the impression there was something I could do, but in reality, I couldn't. Once that started to dawn on me, I realized how screwed I was. It was the emotional equivalent of sinking into a deep black ocean. It was late afternoon when the door opened. Having spent most of the day napping on the couch and anxiously wandering back and forth, I got on my feet like a soldier. One of the guards coaxed me outside. I could tell something was up. People were rushing past us, speaking into their earpieces. We moved in the opposite direction, but I caught a glimpse of a well-dressed group of people used as human shields for someone very important. I was quickly ushered along. I was taken through the hotel kitchen. They'd cleared out the staff. They took me to what looked like an abandoned old walk-in freezer. I was pushed inside and the door was closed. I don't know how those walk-in freezers are supposed to work, but this one was locked from the outside. There were no lights, and I could barely make out what was happening through the little windows. I didn't have to wait long, though. Just minutes later, I could hear other people entering the room. Some curious, some angry, some crying. One by one, the guests from the previous night were ushered into the freezer. Even the old woman. Well, not all the guests. Only those ripe enough. There were 9 of us in total. Some were mildly annoyed, others were confused. Finally, they dropped a guy who had been beaten straight onto the floor. He was clearly not okay, trying his best to breathe through his mouth. That sent most of us off. Some banged on the door, others screamed at the top of their lungs. No one had a phone or a weapon. The panic rose, and it spread like wildfire. Soon I was right there with them, screaming for someone to let us out. I screamed my voice hoarse, but no one came. We must have been in there for 40 to 45 minutes. Our protest died, and in the following silence, we heard someone enter the room. A single set of footsteps. They approached, and we all quieted down. I could see the vague outline of a man outside, but our breaths had fogged up the windows on the door. He had a black suit with a blue tie. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, watching us. I backed away from the door, and others did the same. No matter how bad the freezer was, there was something telling me that this guy was somehow worse. He was too calm. Like this was all normal. He'd done it before. As the door opened, we all scrambled to get back. He stepped into the entrance, obscured by the bad lighting. But for all I could see, he was a man. A little shorter than me, a bit round around the stomach, bald, maybe glasses. There was something reflecting off his face. And yet, there was something about him that screamed danger. The man who'd been beaten was ready to roll the dice. He took off running, trying to push past and get out. There was a kitchen exit not too far away, so if he could just make it past this guy, then maybe he'd be in the clear. But no, he didn't get far. The strange man didn't tackle him, or attack, or scream. In fact, he didn't seem to react at all. But the runner, well, he stopped a few steps short of leaving the freezer. He clutched his throat, gasping for air. The strange man spoke in a raspy, matter-of-fact voice, as if counting the inventory on a supermarket shelf.
Male, 38 years old. 6-year spread reaching a total of 18%. Implant through esophagus surgery.
And then there was this ungodly noise. The runner collapsed to his knees. He was trying to scream, but all that came out was a sort of guttural wheeze. It escaped him in waves, involuntarily, until we could see something poking out of his mouth, like the silhouette of a wet tree branch being pulled out. Finally, there was a snap as it fully dislodged, and the freezer began to reek of blood. He stopped moving. The panic consumed us. I may read calm here in the aftermath, but in that moment, I was an animal. I was scratching on the fucking walls trying to get back. I didn't care if I was pushing people to the floor or stepping on someone's head. I was desperate. The strange man spoke again, but this time his raspy voice seemed better, improved.
Female, 29 years old, 4-year spread reaching a total of 14%. Implant through spinal surgery.
One by one, he counted us off. Male, female, 4 years, 5 years, 9, 8. Percentages going up and down. Lung cancer, cornea transplant, dialysis. Screams and blood. One by one being pulled out of the crowd, then pulled apart. I'll never forget the sounds. Small bones sound like carrots when they snap. Bigger ones, it differs. The dripping noise is human spillage mixed on the floor. Drops of blood really do sound heavier than water. And with every victim, I could see something shift in our captor. Straighter back, deeper breaths, like he was absorbing it all into himself. Taking something back. Harvesting. The sixth person on the chopping block was me. He read it all out loud.
Male, he began. 31 years old. 24-year spread, reaching a total of 11%. Implant through ulcer treatment.
My stomach rumbled, moved, twitched, as if coming alive. It wanted to escape me, to break free. It strained against me. I collapsed to the floor, my hands slipping in the blood, seeping into my skin, itching under my fingernails. Then I felt something move in my pocket. I almost dropped it. I still had my phone battery. I took it out and held it up to my mouth. I could bite down on it, drenching myself in acid or God knows what. My stomach ceased moving, if only for a short reprieve. I looked up at my captor. See this? I said. It'll fuck us both up. But you need it, right? You need me whole? There was no response. I could just see him tilting his head down at me. Yeah. If I destroy myself, you get nothing, right? That's it, isn't it? Huh? I placed it between my teeth, ready to bite down like a rabid dog on a juicy bone. He didn't move as I got up. We circled one another. He wasn't about to let me go. He wasn't looking me in the eyes, he was staring intently at my stomach. He wanted to pull it out of me, to turn it into something else. Or maybe it was a part of him all along, something coming home.
No, he said. It ends.
He reached out a hand for me and I bit down without hesitation. To my surprise, there was just a little puff, but that was it. The battery tumbled to the floor, useless. The man instinctively recoiled, but upon seeing there was no danger, it all came back with a vengeance. The pain was immediate and incredible. Something in me moved, and I immediately spat up a small glob of stomach acid. Then, the battery exploded. It wasn't a big explosion, just a loud bang, like the starting pistol of a race. I slipped and slid my way out of the freezer and had to make a split-second decision. I could close and lock the door behind me, effectively sealing him and everyone in there, or I could leave the door open for others to escape. It wasn't really a choice, not really. It never is when you get pushed into something like this. I slammed the door shut and let it auto-lock without even thinking about it. Perhaps he'd asked the guards to clear out, I don't know. But there was no one else in that kitchen. I grabbed a knife from one of the counters, burst through the exit door, and disappeared into the night, my stomach stirring like a restless animal, but settling as I got further away. I can only regret what happened to those left behind. It still makes my fucking spine itch. A police patrol found me wandering the streets about an hour or two later. I can't imagine it looked good. I was taking such small, shallow breaths, and I was still clutching a kitchen knife. Not to mention I was covered in blood. They were convinced that I'd killed someone, but I surrendered willingly and eagerly. I tried to tell a coherent story, but they just didn't understand me. I probably didn't make much sense. A shower and a fresh set of clothes later, I explained my experience at the hotel to the best of my ability. Sadly, it really didn't do much. There were no records of the man I described ever visiting that hotel. And as for the missing people, those I claimed had been murdered, they had checked out one by one at different hours the day prior, according to hotel records. They might be missing, but there was no indication of foul play. Yeah, I'm calling bullshit on that. So yeah, that was by far the worst time of my life. Looking back at it, it feels unreal. Like it happened to someone else. But even now, I can still get little flashes of something that reminds me of that night. And it pulls me right back. It never really leaves. Whoever that man was, he was important enough to get a whole company to cover for him. I'm sure not all of them knew they were doing it, but they were complacent. I think we're looking at someone with a lot of resources. And a lot of reach. I never got a name, and seeing as how he seemed to change with every victim he consumed, I can't really tell what he looks like anymore. not his age or length or weight. There are surprisingly some real records about a small tribe of people from the Blue Hill in the Scandinavian mountain range. There isn't much out there about them. Just a mention that they worshipped immortal mountain spirits. Others say they worship devils. It's a mixed bag. I don't know what to believe. I don't know what I saw. But I am living with the knowledge that a part of me, something inside of me, isn't my own. It moves with me. It lives within me, but at the snap of a finger from that thing, and it will rebel. It will fail me. And I'm just at, 11%? What happens when I reach 50? 100? I decided to post this today after getting a video ad that I could have never anticipated. It seems that this company is still in business, advertising their next generation of DNA tests. I'm sure some of you out there have seen it. 20 seconds, unskippable. Smiling faces, distant families being tied together by the CGI blue ribbon. I think they have some of those damn sunflowers in the background, still colored that basic company blue. And seeing it like that, it made my stomach turn. Today's video was supported by patrons like Mark from Earth, Crimson Muse, Joy Burton, Diane Showers, Mark Sewall, Cheryl James, Pick Your Sticker, Teddy Dog, Clue 404, Mama Cotto, Dante Kincaid, Zarin Ray, Angela Donovan, Plarian 50, Devin Kyle, Timothy Baird, Ajeti, Bert Turner, Bajani Aspinall, Michael Pierce, Big Joe, Gary Harkonnen, LaDonna Spivey, Scott Tanaka, Tom Stewart, Sherman Davis, Bryce Shelton, Susan McClendon, Elise Batiste, Lisa and the Cult Jam, Open Circuit, Fabulavore, Raymond Jaggers, That Darn Fox, Raison Detra, Kai Gaming 99, Wendy Burns, The Wendigo, Michael Squishy Park, The Gem Star, Vault 77 Citizen, Puppy Dan, Clovis Wolf, Eldridge Elm, Derek Prey, Elder Being, KC Hawaii, Rob T, Tragic Mermaid, Darren Fishnaller, Clove Zenoya Harris, Roe Underwood, Florida Man Luke, Bethany's Mom, Winter's Kiss, Sam Brook, The White Stag, Corgi Connection, No Name, Marta Cara, Professor Elm, Kathy Barrickman, Cybard Sands. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/Jordan Group Horror. As a patron, you get access to bonus videos, a Discord channel, and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.